Someone's in the chat room. Can you tell me if I'm on air? Because I can't hear it myself. And oddly,
So I can't hear Mackie, and I can't
Can you
hear the
hear me?
station.
I'm here. Can you hear me? Hello, hello.
Let's see what.
Hello.
There we
Let's see
go.
what happens.
Okay. So, I don't know. Have you read anything in?
No, I was waiting for you. I couldn't hear the station.
Okay, great. You're back with David Mackey, Shiny Slide Out on Revolution Radio, the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net. So push the donate button or subscribe to the archives that are free. It's really cool. You can download any show you like from any host, and then you can binge them in MP3 format to make it really easy to listen to them. Also, while you're there, get yourself some great merch from the station's website, and everything helps support the station's operation. And that's really important that you do that, because without it, well, I'm going to say the station would no longer exist. And I do thank everyone who's supported the station for all those many, many years. And we're still here. And Mickey and I, this is our 13th year. Now, we are halfway through show number 631, believe it or not. Have all the numbers? That's the numbers for today.
30 and 600.
Exactly. And Mickey, if you want to tell everyone what we're talking about today.
Well, we are talking about, obviously, we're still on the topic of remote viewing and scientific experiments thereon. Now, since I wasn't here last week, what text
I did not, in fact, speak using the show notes at all. So I can tell you that we're at the phrase, an anomaly represents just that. It's still in 4.2.
Yeah, 4.2. In fact, let's do 4.2.1 from the top, because it behooves us. So essentially what we're talking about here, as we have discussed in the week prior to last one, the findings of the study that was undertaken when they looked at EI, or emotional intelligence, and the relationship of emotional intelligence to remote viewing and other extrasensory perception. Right. So these are now the essentially findings that we've shared with you. We looked at some. Now, the question they asked here is, do our results show statistical evidence of an anomalous effect? Right. That was the question. And while you can't see the table, we will make the study, of course, available. It's available online as well, of course. But the table 3 that you can't see shows some effect sizes with provocative implications. To clarify, the effect size indicates the degree to which the hits, i.e. the correct responses or information, exceeded chance expectations. The most relevant results to highlight at this point reference mediation effects and involve group 2, which have high levels of experiential emotional intelligence. Group A, high levels of experiential emotional intelligence again, and Group B, moderate levels of experiential intelligence, or emotional intelligence rather. And Group 1, high levels of experiential emotional intelligence. The total effect size was 0.0457, okay, including 634 cases that they studied there. Now, there are 2 criteria for interpreting these results. Okay. Firstly, we could use the classic Cohen, the 1988 criterion. This is rather arbitrary, but it continues to be widely used and accepted as valid. Cohen suggested the values below 0.2 indicate no effect, between 0.21 and 0.409. The effects are small, between 0.50 and 0.07 rather. The effects are moderate, and the values that are greater than 0.7 are large effects. Applying these criteria to Table 3, we find that those groups within high scores on EI showed large effects. Large effects, and the effects in fact were 0.853 and 0.730 and 0.759, which is much larger than what you would expect. Okay. large effects applying. Okay, and now the effect sizes likewise decrease as EI decreases in the group. So the less emotional intelligence you have, the less of an effect we seem to have. So there seems to be a link between EI and the anomalous effects, let's call them. Okay, we lack sufficient data, this is the study here of course, for a correlational analysis, but can tentatively confirm this trend via visual inspection, which certainly should be tested in new and future research. As Truzzi in 1987 suggested, extraordinary objects of study require analysis and interpretations that go beyond the canonical. Now, what that means is, and I completely disagree, that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That's not at all. An extraordinary claim, in fact, first of all, who decides what's an extraordinary claim, number one, and number two, even if the claim were classified as extraordinary, regular evidence, like any evidence for anything else, is required, not extraordinary evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Just regular evidence, that's it. Secondly, we could apply Ferguson's statistical criterion. Unlike Cohen's, Ferguson's approach, which was formulated in 2009, is based on what effect sizes should be obtained in order to be able to make consistent statistical inferences. Following this principle, a minimum value of 0.4 is needed to assume a small effect. Values equal to or greater than 1.15 indicate moderate effects, and those above 2.70 are strong effects. Using these thresholds, our results can be interpreted as small rather than moderate or large. This implies a lower level of consistency of the inferences, and therefore more original research is needed to make firm conclusions. However, a critical point is that effect sizes are only minimally acceptable, greater than 0.4, when individuals score high on EI. This coincidence and the significant differences obtained with SEM analysis of invariance do support a possible direction of scientific research regarding the explanation of why anomalous cognition occurs. That is, if it is necessary to understand the role of emotions and how participants manage them, the emotions that is, per the level of EI. This does not mean to defend that EI is real or not real. We simply propose that in the way that there are skills, referred to as intelligence, that allow us to regulate certain decisions and actions, these skills could also be applicable to the regulation and use of emotions. We strive to address this point in our RV research. Taken all together, we contend that our results certainly constitute statistical anomalies, as they clearly defy the expectations of probability theory. Along these lines, it is crucial to assess to what degree these statistical anomalies are evidence for anomalous cognition. An anomaly represents just that, something strange that should not happen in statistical terms but does occur. And this occurrence is not one-off, because similar observations are documented across other independent studies that were previously cited here. Such findings do not equate to explanations, so they do not establish the ontological reality of putative psi. So what this means essentially is what they're saying is we haven't proven, completely that this is actually a phenomenon that exists. Okay, that's essentially what they're saying here. That said, we must concede that the effect sizes of these statistical anomalies are consistent with the hypothesis that human cognition is not limited to known scientific knowledge and orthodox theories. Our results certainly highlight that the hypothesis proposal of the first scientists to address RV is not necessarily incompatible with scientific knowledge. You can see here, Nature publications by Tark and Puthoff in 1974, Tart et al. In 1980. Nevertheless, the statistical anomalies observed here and elsewhere add to the growing body of empirical literature that justifies continued research in this area of consciousness studies. Dave?
Yeah, now that brings us to 4.3, limitations and conclusions. Although the preceding discussion highlighted major limitations of our study, arguably the most relevant of these to consider in future research are A. The methodology was quasi-experimental versus strictly experimental, which limits causal statements. B. The positive and significant association between EI and RV hit rates does not imply that emotions are necessarily the underlying mechanism for RV effects. And C, following Hyman, 1996, Group 2's above chance scoring only implies a statistical versus empirical verification of RV phenomena. We should also underscore that our study was not pre-registered, so new research should be conducted in ways that can be externally verified. Describing hypotheses, methods and analyses before a study is conducted helps to foster transparency and thus reduce publication bias, especially with respect to the controversial topics like RV phenomena. For discussion, see Rabiron 2020. Therefore, this updated report on RV and the experiments commissioned by the CIA and the DIA allow us to state the following. A. RV experiments investigated under RV conditions and discarding the survival hypothesis yield above chance results. B. The fact that statistical chance has been overcome does not empirically validate RV, but rather provides statistical verification of a robust anomaly that suggests anomalous cognition might be ontological, real. C. EI and specifically PIC skills significantly predict RV scores between 9 and 19.5%. This raises the possibility that emotions could directly or indirectly precipitate anomalous cognition and perhaps even other psi-related conditions or cognitions. D. Anomalous cognitions should only be regarded as scientifically established phenomena within the statistical and mathematical context, but not be accepted as empirical, validated phenomena due to the lack of tangential evidence linking physical mechanisms to the observed effects. And then finally, our previous publications have echoed Hyman's 1986 skepticism about the ontological reality of psi, e.g. Dagnall et al. 2016, Drinkwater et al. 2021, Escola Gascon 2020A, 2020B, Huron et al. 2017, 2018, and blah, 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 it just goes on. But we also defend the principles of neutrality, intellectual humility, and falsification in scientific research. Thus, the present results compel the authors to voice an updated position statement. That is, our skeptically orientated team obtained ample evidence supporting the existence of robust statistical anomalies that currently lack an adequate scientific explanation and therefore are consistent with the hypothesis of psi. Just remember that phrase. This outcome stands in stark contrast to the literature on experimenter and observer effects, which are often cited as substantial hindrances to psi effects. This is Kennedy, 2003. Our findings certainly undermine this view as a blanket statement. We accordingly recommend that new studies both welcome and leverage the participation of proper skeptics in adversarial collaborations. These exercises are rarely used in parapsychology, but involve researchers with differing views who jointly construct and implement studies that fairly address controversial issues while controlling for obvious ideological biases or methodological artifacts. Indeed, we agree with Cowan and al.'s 2020 assertion that this approach might be the most productive way to change current scientific views on highly controversial topics? Meki.
So just a couple of things before I go on. So what they're saying here is essentially, mathematically and statistically speaking, we have found something that seems to smell funny. But because we don't know what that smell is or how it's generated, we can't say for sure what it is. All we know for sure that there is something there, right? So what they're saying is, yes, it may be what we like to term paranormal, but we don't know that. We just know that something odd is going on here, right? And so this is really where the problem lies with these things. The conventional scientific approach breaks down when it comes to studying phenomena of this nature, simply because they are not easily classified or even boxed up. I mean, what is this really, right? I mean, if you think about this, if I study gravity or neutron stars, or I'm a radio astronomer or whatever it might be, right? Or a chemist even. I mean, there are certain certainties that you have, right? Because the chemicals react a certain way, and
that had a lot of alliteration.
Yeah, that's right. And radio waves and like the spectrum reacts a certain way, and that we know how certain things play out. We do, right? And sometimes we come across something that's weird, but we can make a definitive statement about this, like the wow signal, for example. We go, oh, that's completely out of the ordinary, right? But with this, because we don't understand the mechanisms that underlie extrasensory perception. We understand the chemistry that makes water boil. We understand the chemistry that can turn an acidic compound into a neutral compound, for example. We understand that, right? We understand the physics of gravity, the Newtonian laws. We understand all of that. We get it. We have a good understanding. Now, of course, the deeper we dig, the more we realize we really don't. But with this, and I'm going to propose here that these phenomena, these paranormal, ESP, whatever you want to call them, these phenomena are in fact quantum phenomena. And I say this because they seem to work on quantum level effects and along the same lines as I mean, spooky action at a distance. I mean, how would you explain for a mind to be in two places at once? Because that's what this really is, RV. So you've got remote viewing, you've got the person sitting here, clearly still in the room, okay? But the mind is here, and we now understand that our mind, in fact, our brain seems to be a quantum structure, okay? But at the same time, the remote viewer is also somewhere else looking at something else. But they're still here, but they're also over there. So that is, in fact, I guess, the nature of entanglement, if you will, right? But we don't understand it. It's hard for us to apply it to the human condition because it is just so outside of our normal experiential, world. Well, recently, you go back a few hundred years and go into the East, that's completely normal, these experiences. Everybody goes, yeah, that stuff happens. That's a real thing, And we in the West have gone, no. This is no. I can't cut it up. I can't measure it. I can't, write a neat mathematical formula around it. And it's really the advent of quantum mechanics that has helped us a lot here, I think, in giving legitimacy to these phenomena, because they are, in essence, in my opinion, quantum phenomena. Once we understand the quantum space better.
Well, you're funny. Yeah,
I know. Then we will start understanding this, but we take it as read because we know that entanglement is real. We know the double slit experiment is real. We know all of these things. We know you can experimentally prove it. There it is. But it's the implication. We don't know.
You can't even ask why.
No, but see, it's the same here. We know something is happening. Statistically, mathematically, we can look at it and go, well, here it is. we don't understand the underlying mechanisms, right? But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Nobody likes it. I mean, Einstein hated it. Schrödinger, he was not a proponent. I mean, everybody talks about Schrödinger's cat, and a flippy troll just popped the cat into the chat. I assume that's maybe in response to what we're saying here. But the point is, he didn't come up with that experiment to say, oh, look how wonderful quantum mechanics is. He said, this is silly. I've got a cat here, and I don't know if it's alive or dead until I open the box, because the atom inside that could have decayed and released the poison, or I could not have decayed and released the poison. But I won't know until I open the box. So at this point, according to quantum mechanics, the cat is both alive and dead.
That's right.
And his point was, that's silly. That's silly, silly, silly. He wasn't saying, oh, wonderful quantum mechanics, hurrah, cat is both alive and dead. No. He's saying it's a completely silly kind of statement. And fair enough, too, right? That's what they all agreed and wanted to believe, because people are comfortable with classical physics. They're even comfortable with Einsteinian physics, because they're rules, and they make sense. This makes no sense at all. It makes none. I mean, the way we understand the universe is completely wrong. It's the only statement we can make. Sorry, that was just a little perspective on what we shared with you. Now, the peer review history for the article is available as well, of course, but I do want to help you with the end notes. The authors would like to give a special mention to Dr. Edwin May, former director of Central Intelligence Agency, remote viewing research program. The authors acknowledged the declassified materials he provided for the proper development of the study. Okay, so these people actually took this fairly seriously. Now, the raw data supporting the conclusions of this article will also be made available by the authors without undue reservation. There's a link. I'm going to put it in the chat, but it's show notes that you can go and have a look to study yourself with the raw data. Do what you like. Like I said, don't listen to us. Do your own research, and by your own research, I don't mean go to Wikipedia. Please, that's not what I mean.
No.
Just find the studies. Find the primary evidence if you can. Okay. Go to the original texts, and just on that, before I go on, when you look at the Anunnaki and things like that, go to more than one translation of the texts, of the cuneiform texts. Go to more than one, and I got nothing against Zachary Stitchin. I really don't, but he didn't do us any favors with his translations, right? If you look at the translations that were, and he was the self-taught cuneiform expert. I mean, more power to people that are self-taught, but I like, I do not mind mainstream science. It's very, very important. It's very meticulous, and it does good work, right? I mean, sometimes it comes to the wrong conclusions, but that's okay. I get it. But they are meticulous. So look at the translations, not the Zachary Stitchin translations, because the translations made by the mainstream scientists are amazing enough without needing to invent or stretch translations. They're astounding.
We went to the university's websites to look at what they'd done, and that was pretty good.
It was, it was. But the point is that the translations are so full of amazing insights and data that and again, looking at it through modern eyes, of course, this is what you need to do here. That you don't need to invent anything else. You don't need to stretch or come up with other circumstances. Certainly, the Gigian and so forth were not well represented. Okay, so that's the study. Now, you remember we spoke about the last few weeks, quite a few times, we spoke about the Stargate project, which is in fact, which was a secret U.S. Army unit established in 1978 at Fort Meade in Maryland by the DIA, as well as the SRI, and here, of course, the SIC, to investigate the potential for psychic phenomena in military and domestic intelligence. Right? The project and its precursors and sister projects originally went by various codenames: Gondola Wish, Stargate, Grill Flame, Centerlane, Project CF, Sunstreak, Scan 8, and until 1991, when they were consolidated and rechristened as the Stargate project. The Stargate project primarily worked involved remote viewing, the purported ability to psychically see events, sites, or information from a great distance. The project was overseen until 1987 by Lieutenant Frederick Holmes Skip Atwater, an aide and psychic headhunter to Major General Albert Stubblebine, and later president of the Monroe Institute. The unit was small scale, comprising about 15 to 20 individuals, and was run out of an old leaky wooden barracks, that's what they say. The Stargate project was terminated and declassified in 1995 after a CIA report concluded that it was never useful in any intelligence operation. Information provided by the program was vague and included irrelevant, erroneous data, and there were suspicions of interjudge reliability. The program was featured in the 2004 book and 2009 film, both titled The Man Who Stared at Goats, although neither mentioned it by name. Now, this is the official. Now, after all we've told you, this is the official stance on the Stargate project. Right now, I'm going to give you some more detail on the people involved here as well. But before I go there, the book, The Man Who Stared at Ghosts, was written by Ron Johnson. Now, Ron Johnson also wrote Them. Them, I think it's a fantastic book where he spends time with extremists. David Icke was there. He spent time with the KKK. He's a really great investigative journalist, I think. And he eventually he went to investigate this. He went to investigate remote viewing, the Stargate program, etc., etc. And he spoke to all of these people, right? And they really tried to build, a psychic warrior unit for the United States. And the movie, The Man Who Stared at Goats, which was based on the book very, very loosely, by the way, featured George Clooney in the title role. I think he played Stubblebine and a few others. So if you haven't seen the movie, it's actually quite entertaining. Go ahead. And the project, or under Stubblebine, one of the Special Forces operatives claims to have killed the goat by simply staring at it. And that's why it's called The Man Who Stared at Goats. And it shook him so much, I think, that he resigned his commission. I can't remember. But it really shook him to his core, where he truly believed that he had killed this goat just with the power of his mind. Just give you a bit of background. But these people really were very keen on establishing a psychic warrior unit for the United States Army. Right? This was no joke. It was a very serious undertaking. Dave?
The background. Information in the US on psychic research in some foreign countries was poorly detailed, based mostly on rumour and innuendo from second-hand or tertiary reporting, attributed to both reliable and unreliable disinformation sources from the Soviet Union. The CIA and DIA decided they should investigate and know as much about it as possible. Various programs were approved yearly and refunded accordingly. Reviews were made semi-annually, and the Senate and House Select Committee level. At the Senate and House Select Committee level, work results were reviewed, and remote viewing was attempted, with the results being kept secret from the viewer. It was thought that if the viewer was shown they were incorrect, it would damage the viewer's confidence and skill. This was standard operating procedure throughout the years of military and domestic remote viewing programs. Feedback to the remote viewer of any kind was rare. It was kept classified and secret. Remote viewing attempts to sense unknown information about places or events. That's what it does. Normally, it is performed to detect current events, but during military and domestic intelligence applications, viewers claim to sense things in the future, experiencing precognition. Mackie.
My machine is frozen. Sorry, man, I'll let you know. Hang on. Yeah.
History. You're back?
Yes, 1970s.
Correct.
In 1970 United States, intelligence sources believed that the Soviet Union was spending 60 million rubles annually on psychotronic research. In response to claims that the Soviet program had produced results, the CIA initiated funding for a new program known as ScanAid, Scan Bar Coordinate. In the same year, remote viewing research began in 1972 at the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, at Menlo Park in California. Proponents, Russell Tark and Harold Puthoff, of the research said that a minimum accuracy rate of 65% required by the clients was often exceeded in their later experiments. Physicists Russell Tark and Harold Puthoff began testing psychics for SRI in 1972, including one who would later become an international celebrity, Israeli Uri Geller. Their apparently successful results garnered interest within the U.S. Department of Defense. Ray Hyman, professor of psychology at the University of Oregon, was asked by Air Force psychologist Lieutenant Colonel Austin W. Kibler, then director of behavioral research for ARPA, to go to SI and investigate. He was to specifically evaluate Geller. Hyman's report to the government was that Geller was a complete fraud, and as a consequence, Tark and Puthoff lost a government contract to work further with him. The result was publicity tour for Geller, Tark, and Puthoff to seek private funding for further research work on Geller. Anything you want to add to Geller there, Dave?
Oh, well, he was the only true registered psychic represented there in that group.
It's interesting that he would be immediately, designated as a complete fraud. Very interesting.
Well, when he went public, he was talking about bending spoons and, so... Yeah, so look, they do know everything about a person and can bring them down at any whim that they choose.
That's true.
So, yeah, it's awful.
One of the project's successes was the location of a lost Soviet spy plane in 1976 by Rosemary Smith, a young administrative assistant recruited by Project Director Dale Graff. In 1977, the Army Assistant Chief of Staff for Intelligence, ACSI, Systems Exploitation Detachment, SED, started the Gondola Wish program to evaluate potential adversary applications of remote viewing. Army intelligence then formalized this in mid-1978 as an operational program, Grill Flame, based in buildings 2560 and 2561 at Fort Meade in Maryland. 1980s. In early 1979, the research at SRI was integrated into Grill Flame, which was redesignated INSCOM Center Lane Project, or ICLP, in 1983. In 1984, the existence of the program was reported by Jack Anderson, and in that year, it was unfavorably received by the National Academy of Sciences National Research Council. In late 1985, the Army funding was terminated, but the program was redesignated Sunstreak and funded by the DIA Scientific and Technical Intelligence Directorate. Dave?
Yeah, that's right. In 1991, most of the contracting for the program was transferred from SRI to Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC, with Edwin May controlling 70% of the contractor funds and 85% of the data. Its security was altered from Special Access Program, SAP, to Limited Dissemination, or LIMDIS, and it was given a final name, Stargate. You still with me, Mackie?
Okay. No, I'll go. In 1995, the Defense Appropriations Bill directed the program be transferred from DIA to CIA oversight. The CIA commissioned a report by the American Institutes for Research that found that remote viewing had not been proved to work by a psychic mechanism and said it had not been used operationally. The CIA subsequently cancelled and declassified the program. In 1995, the project was transferred to the CIA, and a retrospective evaluation of the results was done. The appointed panel consisted primarily of Jessica Utz and Ray Hyman, as we've just learned earlier. Hyman had produced an unflattering report on Uri Geller and SRI for the government 2 decades earlier, but the psychologist David Marks found Utz's appointment to the review panel puzzling, given that she had published papers with Edwin May, considering this joint research likely to make her less than impartial. A report by Utz claims the results were evidence of psychic functioning. However, Hyman in his report argued Utz's conclusions that ESP had been proven to exist, especially precognition, was premature and the findings had not been independently replicated. Hyman came to this conclusion. Psychologists such as myself, who study subjective validation, find nothing striking or surprising in the reported matching of reports against targets in the Stargate data. The overwhelming amount of data generated by the viewers is vague, general, and way off target. The few apparent hits are just what we would expect if nothing other than reasonable guessing and subjective validation are operating. A later report by Ayer came to a negative conclusion. Joe Nickell wrote the following. Other evaluators, 2 psychologists from AIR, assessed the potential intelligence gathering usefulness of remote viewing. They concluded that the alleged psychic technique was of dubious value and lacked the concreteness and reliability necessary for it to be used as a basis for making decisions or taking action. The final report found reason to suspect that in some well-publicized cases of dramatic hits, the remote viewers might have had substantially more background information than might have otherwise be apparent. According to Ayer, which performed a review of the project, no remote viewing report ever provided actual information for any intelligence operation. Dave?
Getting there. Based upon the collected findings, which recommended a higher level of critical research and tighter controls, the CIA terminated the $20 million project, citing a lack of documented evidence that the program had any value to the intelligence community. Time magazine stated in 1995, 3 full-time psychics, fix that in post, were still working on a $500,000 a year budget out of Fort Meade in Maryland, which would soon close. David Marks, in his book, The Psychology of the Psychic from 2000, discussed the flaws in the Stargate project in detail. Marks wrote that there were 6 negative design features of the experiments. The possibility of cues or sensory leakage, as it's known, was not ruled out. No independent replication. Some experiments were conducted in secret, making peer review impossible. Marks noted that the judge Edwin May was also the principal investigator for the project, and this was problematic, making a huge conflict of interest with collusion, queuing, and fraud being possible. Marks concluded the project was nothing more than a subjective delusion, and after 2 decades of research, it failed to provide any scientific evidence for the legitimacy of remote viewing. The Stargate project was terminated in 1995 following an independent review which concluded the foregoing observations provide a compelling argument against continuation of the program within the intelligence community. Even though a statistically significant effect has been observed in a laboratory, it remains unclear whether the existence of a paranormal phenomenon, remote viewing, has been demonstrated. The laboratory studies do not provide evidence regarding the origins or nature of the phenomenon, assuming it exists, nor do they address an important methodological issue of interjudge reliability. Further, even if it could be demonstrated unequivocally that a paranormal phenomena occurs under the conditions present in the laboratory paradigm, these conditions have limited applicability and utility for intelligence gathering operations. For example, the nature of the remote viewing targets are vastly dissimilar, as are the specific tasks required of the remote viewers. More importantly, the information provided by remote viewing is vague and ambiguous, making it difficult, if not impossible, for the technique to yield information of sufficient quality and accuracy of information for actionable intelligence. Wow, they're really harsh words. Thus, we conclude that continued use of remote viewing in intelligence gathering operations is not warranted. In January 2017, the CIA published records online of the Stargate project as part of the CREST archive. What was the methodology?
Yeah, so before we go there, so this is again, this is the official stance. So we've shared with you the official opinion, then we've shown you the research that was done, we've shown you the point of view from the actual remote viewers as well, okay? And we're going to conclude again because you have to remember, this is what is commonly believed about this program. But I think with the information that we've given you now, you're armed to understand that there's more to it than meets the eye. So is it possible that this initiative, this project has gone, well, underground is probably the wrong word, but gone into, a deep black budget? The answer to that, I would say, is probably yes. Because it did provide, as we've shown you, significant operational data that was used, in fact. And to this day, psychics are being used. And this is not a special show that you watch. I mean, I watch these true crime shows quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And in those true crime shows, a lot of, especially in America, a lot of police departments, make use of psychics. And in some cases, at least that's being presented, they're extremely successful, even against what the FBI is profiling the perpetrator to be. So in one case, the FBI said, no, this is a white male in his 30s. Turns out it was an African American. I can't remember what the age was, but completely off the profile that the FBI put together. So they ignored the psychic until eventually the perpetrator was captured and found to be an African American. And this is really, really important to understand. There's an official line, right, which is, it doesn't work, it's all nonsense. And you have to ask yourself this: would the Soviet Union spend decades pumping money into this, the experiment with Kozyrev's mirror and other things? And would America really spend decades funding this research if there was nothing coming out of it? Mm-hmm. For decades? Would they really? Mm-mm. Maybe something happened in '95. Maybe something, maybe something to do with 9/11. I don't know. Where this had to go underground completely. This had to disappear off the books, just like gravity or anti-gravity research, right? And we know when certain things come to the surface, that research is then either discouraged or goes completely underground. Similar with what happened to quite a few of the Tesla papers. Okay. Now, but let's look at the methodology here and then close it off by talking about the civilian personnel that were involved here. The Stargate project created a set of protocols designed to make the research of clairvoyance and out-of-body experience more scientific. That's really why I shared with you the last study that Dave and I read out, because that's after this. Okay, the study took a different approach, and more scientific and statistical rigor was applied. And still, the results were significant statistically. And to minimize as much as possible session noise and accuracy, the term remote viewing emerged as shorthand to describe this more structured approach to clairvoyance. Project Stargate will only receive emission after all other intelligence attempts, methods, or approaches had already been exhausted. So this was a Hail Mary attempt at information. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. I think they used it significantly more than they said that it. It was reported that at peak manpower there were over 22 active military and civilian remote viewers providing data. People leaving the project were not replaced. When the project closed in 1995, this number had dwindled down to 3. One was using tarot cards. According to Joseph McMonigal, the Army never had a truly open attitude towards psychic functioning, hence the use of the term giggle factor and the saying, I wouldn't want to be found dead next to a psychic. Now let's look at the people involved. And interesting enough, there's nothing here on Uri Geller. They just, no, we don't know what to talk about him.
So,
go ahead.
Hal Puthoff. In the 1970s, CIA and DIA granted funds to Harold E. Puthoff to investigate paranormal abilities, collaborating with Russell Targ in a study of the purported psychic abilities of Uri Geller, Ingo Swann, Pat Price, Joseph McGonigal, and others, as part of the Stargate project of which Puthoff became a director. As with Ingo Swann and Pat Price, Puthoff attributed much of his personal remote viewing skills to his involvement with Scientology, whereby he had attained, at that time, the highest level. All 3 eventually left Scientology in the late 1970s. Puthoff worked as a principal investigator of the project. His team of psychics is said to have identified spies, located Soviet weapons and technologies, such as a nuclear submarine in 1979, and helped find the lost Scud missiles in the First Gulf War and plutonium in North Korea in 1994.
Russell Targ. In the 1970s, Russell Targ began working with Harold Puthoff on the Stargate project while working with him as a researcher at Stanford Research Institute.
Edwin May. Edwin C. May joined the Stargate project in 1975 as a consultant and was working full-time in 1976. The original project was part of the Cognitive Sciences Laboratory managed by May. With more funding in 1991, May took the project to the Palo Alto offices at SAIC. This would last until 1995, when the CIA closed the project. May worked as a principal investigator, judge, and the Star Gatekeeper for the project. Marx says this was a serious weakness for the experiments, as May had conflict of interest and could have done whatever he wanted with the data. Marx has written that May refused to release the names of the Oversight Committee and refused permissions for him to give an independent judging of the Stargate transcripts. Marx found this suspicious, commenting, "This refusal suggests that something must be wrong with the data or with the methods of data selection."
Ingo Swann, another interesting character, originally tested in the Phase 1, were OOBE Beacon RV experiments at the American Society for Psychical Research under Research Director Carlos Osis, a former OT7 Scientologist, level 7, clear really, who alleged to have coined the term remote viewing as a derivation of protocols originally developed by René Varcollier, a French chemical engineer in the early 20th century, documented in the book Mind to Mind, Classics and Consciousness series books. Swann's achievement was to break free from the conventional mold of casual experimentation and candidate burnout, and develop a viable set of protocols that put clairvoyance within a framework named Coordinate Remote Viewing, CRV. In a 1995 letter, Edwin C. May wrote he had not used Swann for 2 years because there were rumors of him briefing a high-level person at SAIC and the CIA on remote viewing and aliens and ETs. So Swann stepped outside of, I guess, the program and dealt with high-level SAIC and CIA, I guess, handlers or executives, which makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, totally. 100%. Pat Price, a former Burbank, California police officer and former Scientologist who participated in a number of Cold War-era remote viewing experiments, including the US government-sponsored Project Scan-8 and the Stargate project. Price joined the program after a chance encounter with fellow Scientologists at the time, Harold Puthoff and Ingo Swann, near SRI. Working with maps and photographs provided to him by the CIA, Price claimed to have been able to retrieve information from facilities behind Soviet lines. He is probably best known for his sketches of cranes and gantries which appeared to conform to CIA intelligence photographs. At the time, the CIA took his claims seriously.
Indeed. Now, there was also military personnel, as we discussed last time. I'm not sure we can get through all of this. We probably won't. They're interesting, though. And then,
oh, wow, it's 5:54. Goodness me. I
know time is running away from us. But before we leave here for today, so we'll talk about the military personnel next time. Do read the book, The Man Who Stared at Goats, or at least look at the movie, The Man Who Stared at Goats. Not quite accurate to the book, though. But next week we'll share with you an article from 1995 about remote viewing, and an interview that was conducted with Joseph McMoneagle, whom we have just mentioned. So this was written in 1995, right? So it could be quite interesting to have a bit of more insight here into remote viewing. He was one of the military guys as well. And then we're also going to share with you a patent that was lodged in Russia, and it's called Device for Correction of Man's Psychosomatic Diseases. And guess what? It's a Kozyrev mirror.
What?
Okay? It belongs into the category of magnetic treatment devices. Okay,
wow.
And it was, I know, right? The actual patent is from 1996. Okay, and we'll go into some detail on that, just to give you an idea of what that is, and that's how we will close it off. But there's actually a patent for the Kozyrev mirror on the world and in Russia, and like I said, it's called Device for Correction of Man's Psychosomatic Diseases, and it belongs to the magnetic treatment devices category. And I think the patent is RU 2122446, C for Charlie 1. Okay, that's what that is. And the application, there's actually the whole history of applications as well, in Cyrillic no less, which is not useful to me, but that's where we are. So look, what I would like to say though, Dave, is this. Of course, you have to make up your own mind as to where you stand with this, but be aware that this is a real thing. This is a thing that happens, and people could very well be remote viewing you. I don't know who you are, right? But certainly, it's highly controversial because there is no privacy anymore. And we're also going to talk about L. Ron Hubbard, by the way, and the CIA.
There we go. You know, it's another Shiny Side Out done. We'll see you for breakfast Tuesday and Thursday morning, 7 a.m. for Plato's Cave, and then once again back here again for Sunday's Shiny Side Out. Coming up next is Jer Bear with his awesome show After Hours. We'll catch you next week and stay safe.